Hey everyone! This is a new segment we're calling the Hainai B-Sides, where we answer questions from the audience about certain episodes, characters, and other topics. We will be doing this monthly, covering multiple episodes at a time, and we'll be releasing it partially on our public feed, while the full episodes are available on our Patreon from the $10 tier and above. Thanks so much to everyone who made this possible, both the listeners and especially the patrons. Hi there! This is Motzie Dapul, the creator of the Hainai podcast and voice of Datuin. I'm here with my friend Edward.
Hi, I'm Edward, the voice of Danny Boyd.
Heck yeah! And Danny Boyd, if for those of you who don't know, was our lovely barista from the Winter Market and Pride episodes. And for those of you who do know, yay! Danny! But yeah, so today we are starting our very first B-Side, wherein we answer some questions about the Hainai podcast. This is an unscripted bonus content for our patrons, but if you're hearing it right now, it's because a lot of this episode will be available to the public, and we wanted to do something fun and different, and cover many different topics, including certain episodes of Hainai. So if you want your questions answered on our B-Sides, you can submit them to all of our socials at HainaiPod, HINAYPOD, and we will answer them on episodes of the B-Sides. Each of them will be themed, mostly after certain episodes, because these will be released monthly. But sometimes we'll do some special B-Sides focusing on certain characters and topics, and just, other things that are of interest to our listeners, especially now that Hainai is in its 60-plus episodes, and we have a lot to talk about. So that'll be fun. I just wanted to do something that was more unscripted, because we usually do focus on just scripted stuff, and after a while, writing is hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Writing's really hard. Yeah, thank you. It's, I don't want to write anymore. That's kind of that's how the B-Sides was conceived. Me one day just talking to Edward and being like, I don't want to write anymore. Yeah. But we have to make content TM. So.
Content. The grind for content, it never ends.
Yeah, right? That's the grind set. This is the grind set right here. More content. No, but for real though.
Gotta get in that grind.
Yeah, gotta be on that grind. But for real though, I am very excited because some people submitted some really fun questions about the last 3 episodes. So this episode is actually focused on the Winter Market bonus episode, which people wanted so bad that they paid us money, which was...
Yeah, that was really exciting.
No. That was super exciting. I was so happy. But yeah.
I was ecstatic.
Yeah, right? And the second episode we're talking about is Hilaga Part 1, or North Part 1, and Hilaga Part 2. So for those of you who do know, it is the episode where we introduce Hainai's newest, hottest character, the Pit.
Yay, the Pit! All hail the Pit!
The Pit! All hail the Pit! I love it. It's one of those memes. I think it's the very first naturally occurring meme Hainai has had, actually.
I honestly think so. It was really funny to see people Pit posting in the Discord server. By the way,
I know, right?
You should totally join the Discord server.
True. The Discord is fun. I don't tell people about it because if people really want to join, they'll find it.
Yeah.
It's like a secret. But it is very fun once you're there.
It's an open secret. But it is really fun.
It's an open secret. Yeah. For people who want to join, you can join. But yeah, if you can't find the link to our Discord, then you can just ask and we'll provide it.
Yeah.
It's kind of our way of avoiding spam. Because there is a big possibility of spam, so I don't have it just plastered on everything. I try to just let people find it naturally.
Yeah.
And if they can't find it, they can ask, and we can just provide a link so that there's not when we were smaller, that wasn't a problem, but now it's going to be a little bit more like we have to be a bit more careful.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, some of the big Discord servers tend to have a bot problem, so this is just a good way to protect the community from potential spam.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm going to go into our first question. All of these questions come from all of our different sources, all of our different socials. YouTube, we also have some from our Discord, everywhere basically. So the first question I have here this is not in chronological order, by the way. This is just like in order of me screenshotting the questions and then putting them in my computer.
So real.
But here, the first question is from Meggy on YouTube. And Meggy asks, what inspired the pit / this arc of the story in general? Taking the elders north to see some unspeakable horrors, it feels like the camping episode was just a taste of a much broader supernatural landscape our Scooby Gang is about to encounter. I love this question.
That is such a good question.
Right? Especially because the camping episode was where we encountered the Wahila. And for those listeners who might be making connections in their heads, we have a few of those. We have a lot of people who have their own murder boards and Red String.
Oh, it's great.
It's great. Shout out to Alex and Becca. But this one is interesting because we are actually going to go more into the topic of the pit and this arc in general in another episode, which will be entitled Dambuhala, or giant. But specifically, Dambuhala is a Filipino word for a giant creature. So, if you remember the Wahila from the camping episode, you might have an inkling of what we will be talking about in that episode. It's still, it's coming soon, but I'm really excited about it because this aspect of Hainai is one that kind of takes you out of the city, takes you out of these very small but, significant moments of horror, personal horror, and kind of expands the world of Hainai into something a lot more, as I put in the trigger warnings, cosmic. It's going to be super fun. And yeah, the inspiration is just, I think in general, Hainai, even from the beginning, even though it has felt very small and personal, Hainai already introduced the concept of gods through Mary. Mary worships gods, and she's mentioned them throughout the series, kind of in small doses. But that is an aspect of Hainai that we have not fully explored, and the idea of something much, much bigger than all of them, including their big bad elders, is something that I've always wanted to study. And the Pit episode kind of plays with that as well. You have a character like Savard, who is such a he was a leader of the elders, he was so powerful, he was so scary, and then suddenly he realizes he is, in the grand scheme of things, very, very, very small. And that's really what inspired this arc, this part of the series, and the Pit. As I said, the Pit, I have said this kind of in passing or as a joke in certain parts of the Discord and other discussions, but I keep saying Pit is Maw. Because Pit is Maw. Because the Pit is just the Maw. And I need people to kind of consider that when the pit is so gigantic that it takes hours to get even halfway down. And of course, the other imagery in this episode, such as, the rivers being tears and spittle, the aurora being eyes for something without eyes. There's just a concept there that I want to especially for the elders who think they're so powerful, who think they've got everything, to understand just how small they are.
That's my favorite bit in horror, really, is, you have this big, bad, evil guy who thinks they're all that, and then they are faced with their own mortality. And it's something that I think Hainai does incredibly well. So, good job, Motzie. You've hit on my favorite form of fiction.
Yay! Yippee! And yeah, people have described it as eldritch, and I think, there's something to that. I do think that there's an appreciation for eldritch horror, despite who Lovecraft is as a person.
Yeah.
But there is something very poetic about this guy who is scared of everything in life, making a horror that is just not necessarily, incomprehensible, but also grasps a feeling that exists in sort of an unknowing.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And it's just a wonderful bit of storytelling.
It really
and
is.
Definitely somebody said that it reminded them of what was it, The Terror? I haven't watched that show, but I think I would love it. The one where all those guys go in that ship and then go to the Arctic to die. That's all I know about it. But yeah, stuff like that also, with Hainai, even though it has a very basic premise, I want to do so much horror, so much different horror. That's why it's still an anthology, a semi-anthology. Like, it has an overarching plot, but I still want to tell some standalone-ish stories, and this is how I do it, by exploring the world that exists. It still relates to the main characters and the major characters, but it's something where, yeah, you learn about new parts of the world that you didn't even consider, and the fact that there are things much bigger than these big bads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you do a really good job in doing that because all of those standalone stories feel like they are part of the same world. They help answer questions for some things, and then they raise questions about other things. But they all really do feel like they're small stories contained in a much larger world, but they're all part of that world. They're not like, none of it feels like it might belong to a different universe, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting my ideas across very well, but it is something that I really appreciate about Hainai, is that none of the stories feel like they're separate in their own little bubbles. They do belong part of a cohesive whole.
Thank you. Yeah. I do love that. It as I said before, I was inspired by the Magnus Archives, and Magnus Archives does that pretty well.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that doesn't feel within the world in Magnus Archives was a special episode where it took place in space.
Uh-huh.
And even then, there was like a reasoning for it and everything. But that's really the only episode I can think of that felt out of place in the whole lore of the Magnus Archives.
Yeah, I'd agree with
and
that.
Just because it was the only one in space. Like,
Yeah.
that's the only episode they ever
Exactly.
did in space. Yeah, but it was still good, and, like, it still fit in, and that's kind of, like, I want to expand a little bit like that. There's a balance I have to set because I've already started the overarching plot, and I have to continue it. So all of these standalones, quote-unquote standalone episodes that I want to do have to move the story forward in some way. And thankfully, because of the way the story has been set up, there are moments where I can do these standalone, quote-unquote, episodes that will still be relevant in the next, few episodes. So, very excited about that. And a wonderful first question. Okay, so the second question is from our lovely patron and Discord, regular, Becca Terrier. So Becca asks, question for the B-side for this episode. What was the episode like before you had time to expand it? The same general outline, but sparser, less detail, more condensed? ? Maybe you can't answer that until we finish part 2, but I'd love to hear you talk about that process and how the story grew. So obviously this question was before part 2, and basically, for those of you who don't know, because this might be lost in, time, the episode Hilaga was actually delayed for a week because I'd lost my voice. So there was an unintentional delay, which has kind of thrown off our schedule, but that's fine. It's fine. And so while I couldn't use my voice, I decided to just continue expanding on that episode. And I think it turned out much better because of all the horrors that I was able to put into the episode. I think that the scope of it got bigger, which feels right because it's an episode about how big things can really be. And originally, there weren't as many moments of horror, which I think now makes the episode a lot better. I think I was just gonna skim over certain parts, but ultimately the story took me where I wanted to go, and I had a similar feeling with a previous episode, the cave episode, which I really, really love, and it's one of our longest standalone episodes before we started to, limit our time a bit so that we could have more episodes spread out. But similar to the cave episode, the story felt like it needed to go farther and farther. And while it didn't go as long as maybe I wanted it to, I did have a timeline and I needed to finish it before, post it by the next episode. It was still so much bigger than I intended, and I love it for that because it just allows me to roll around in that atmosphere and allows me to sort of give more time to just how many people died on this expedition. I was able to kind of give more reason, because if it had been his original form, it would have been I think 3 more people would have died from that earthquake, just without any fanfare. And even one of those, and I think doing that once was fine. I said this one guy just fell and nobody saw him. I feel like that adds a bit of horror. But if it was 3 guys fell and nobody saw them, I'm okay, you're just trying to make your quota.
Exactly.
Of the guys who died. I was okay, fine. I put too many guys. There are so many guys. I gotta kill so many guys. But but yeah, no.
Yeah, it was really interesting seeing the shift away from the written initial concept to what we end up getting. And I think it's never good when people get sick. Obviously, like you were really suffering, you couldn't speak, and it was really frustrating for you.
It was pretty funny, honestly. Sorry, like this.
Yeah, your poor voice. But I think it ended up working out for the better because the episode that we ended up getting, that two-parter episode, really helped shape the overall horror of that expedition up into the north. And I think, like, being able to expand on what happened, how it happened, the timeline in which things went down from their arrival to their departure, I think set it up a lot more effectively. The story didn't feel rushed, and I think it overall became a lot better of an episode because of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy. And also, Edward did mention something that I think I should mention to everybody, is that Edward saw the outline before it came out, because Edward helps me with the writing process, which is great.
I do on occasion help out. I don't do any of the writing. That's all Motzie, but occasionally I will look over things to be like, yeah, I think this is working, or I'm a little confused about this part. Just a second set of eyes.
Yeah, it's great because for those of you who don't know, I used to have a co-creator, Reg. I mean, she's still around. It's just that she's no longer the co-creator. Well, she is the co-creator. She's no longer active, I should say, in the High Night production because life got in the way, as it so often does. And she is, becoming a doctor, which I think is a bigger priority.
Absolutely. I'm proud of Reg for being able to do that because it's very difficult to sometimes take time away from a passion project to focus on real life. So very proud of Reg for being able to do that. It wasn't an easy choice for sure.
It sure wasn't. I actually had to I didn't force her off the show. I forced her to take a break. And then when she got the break, that's when she realized she needed, she couldn't continue. And so that's why she left the production. Which I think only when you realize, you just can't handle something and you suddenly have time to, kind of focus yourself, that's when, you realize, well, I actually do need this time. So that's what actually happened. I believe she was, hitting a very, very rough patch. So I told her, you need to, stop and take a break because you are, even normally, medical students just have a rough time of it. To be a medical student and have to work on a podcast, that has, a deadline and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, you gotta stop you gotta stop. But, I think it was, very, very, I'm very proud of her for making that decision.
Yeah,
even though
absolutely.
I'm also missing her, obviously, and she used to be my writing partner and everything, so for a while I was like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And then I'm very grateful Edward stepped in and was like, I was already telling Edward some stuff even before this, but then when Reg stepped off, I was like, okay, I do need someone to help me because writing is always better when you have somebody to kind of bounce ideas off of and kind of clarify ideas and everything.
Exactly.
So Edward has been amazing, and also we just love to chat about High Night. So it's just been fun.
It's been a really fun time. I appreciate you having me on for that part. Also, for anybody wondering, I got the position because I went into Motzie's DMs and begged hands and knees for spoilers, and that's how that happened. So, so sometimes spoilers. Begging does pay off.
Hell yeah! Gotta love it. It's special spoilers for special people. But yeah, so that's how Edward knew that the original script was a lot short. Well, not necessarily the original script. The original script wasn't done.
The original outline.
But the original outline. We would discuss the events of an episode. So I had discussed the events, but I was very vague on specifics. So when I started writing it out, that's when it got bigger and bigger. So the outline was meant to fit one 15 to 25 minute episode, which is now our usual time frame. And then it expanded to a 40-something minute episode, which is more in line with our older episodes, but we do have to cut it in half because we do want to release more episodes more often throughout the month, because we used to do monthly. Did y'all know that? And now we're trying to release 3 times a month with certain episodes.
Yeah, imagine having to wait an entire month for an episode. Man.
Yeah, imagine. Good
imagine.
gosh. So I'm saving the best question for last, actually, because I just saw it
okay.
and I was like, I'm saving that one. Okay. From Jem, one of our other lovely Discord people. When I was younger, there was this video on YouTube that was supposedly an actual pit on Earth somewhere where you could hear screams from, and people would say it's the door of, I don't know how to say this, sorry, but like Sehenem or hell. Is it like that? Question mark. And if so, is worshipping the pit, does it mean that we're some type of Iblis or something? Are we Satanists?
That is such an excellent question.
It's a very good question. Are we Iblis or are we Satanists? Oh, well, who knows? Maybe. Cannot confirm or deny. Maybe so.
I mean, it depends on what the pit actually is, because do we have a full definition? Do we actually know?
We know we know of its features. We don't know what it is. We know it's big enough to have rivers for tears. And I will say, okay, actually, there was an inspiration I want to mention. It's something that people might already suspect, but one of the inspirations for my descriptions for not the pit, but what the pit is, or what it represents, or what it's part of, is I used to have a wonderful mythology book that I was kind of afraid of because it had such good art that some of the gods that were scary were really scary.
Yeah.
I remember there was a page on it that I did not want to look at, which showed like the goddess Kali, because she her depiction is that she sticks out her tongue and to be like terrifying and also catch blood and all that. And
yeah, I can see how that'd be scary.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it now and it's not scary, but for a kid, it was like,
yeah,
I can't
absolutely.
look at it. I can't look at it. It's so scary. And
exactly.
she was, she's meant to be, right? Like, she's meant to be fierce. She's meant to be, like, scary, quote unquote. But yeah, so in that mythology book, I remember one of the stories was about the creation of the earth or the land in Norse mythology. And in Norse mythology, I have to remember, like, what his name was. There was a giant. Like, there was a was it a frost giant? I have to brush up on my Norse mythology, actually.
You'd think as somebody who likes Norse mythology, I'd be able to remember this information, but I'm drawing a complete blank right now.
I forgot. But, okay. I'm bringing it up right now just to see if I'm right. But from what I remember, there was a giant whose spittle was the water, or like whose tears were the water. So a very similar vibe, where basically there's this great giant whose body became the earth. And I'm sure people who love Norse mythology are like tearing their hair out right now, being like, why don't you remember? And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Sorry, everybody. It'll come back to me as soon as we're done recording this.
Yeah, right. As soon as we're done recording this. Okay, actually, here we go. So, Argelmir was the name? In Norse mythology, the first being, a giant who was created from the drops of water that formed when the ice of Niflheim met the heat of Muspelheim. Argelmir was the father of all giants. A male and female grew under his arm, and his legs produced a six-headed son. I think that's what I remember. It was either Argelmir or Ymir, who I'm remembering. Either way, it did remind me of how, yeah, I remember it was a cow nourished him with her milk. I remember that. And I also remember Buri, who was the grandfather of Odin, and that they had eventually killed Argelmir, and the flow of his blood drowned all but one frost giant, and they put his body in the void and fashioned the earth from his flesh, the seas from his blood, the mountains from his bones, stones from his teeth, the sky from his skull, and the clouds from his brain. And
wow.
Yeah, so that was an image that I saw in this book for children, but this very well drawn book for children.
Amazing.
But that stuck with me. So like the way they had kind of laid out how this human-like body was so gigantic that it formed like the universe. I love that image, and so I had, like, the lines about, the rivers were its tears and spittle, the pit was its maw, etc., etc. So, like, there are moments of that, something where you cannot fathom the size of the universe, but we tell these wonderful, like, mythologies and stories about the universe at scale, and imagining creatures and things and, thinking beings that are so enormous that they cannot be conceived.
Yeah, Like, it's just so big that we can only ever see the small pieces of it, not the whole.
Exactly. And that's a major inspiration for this episode. And I think, I can also talk more about the pit, but again, a lot of it is going to be covered in the Dambuhala episode. And for those of you who are listening still, the Dambuhala episode will involve the wonderful Wahila once again, who I voiced because, I have to do this voice to do the Wahila.
Have you ever discussed your inspiration for the Wahila?
I'm sure people have already picked up on it. It's
Probably.
Moro from Spirited Away. From Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, that's my
It's
listener
Moro.
question is, what was the inspiration for the Wahila? But that probably should be saved for another episode when we're actually talking about a Wahila-centric episode. We're still trying to talk about the pit, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's related. And yeah, the Wahila, I'm sure people have guessed, is inspired by Moro from Princess Mononoke, from Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke. And that's why when she speaks, you can hear, like, wolf growls in the background, because in the English dub, where they have Gillian Anderson as the wolf, they made the really cool decision to, like, put some wolf growls behind her voice to kind of give more of an impression of a wolf. And yeah, so I did that as well, but I did a voice like this because that's how I think a wolf should speak or something.
You do a really good job with it.
Thank you, this is my... I don't know. I don't know what voice that is like. I don't even know who I'm copying here. I'm just going as low as I possibly can, and this is how it sounds like.
You definitely do a good job with it, for sure. I enjoy it.
Yippee! I'm excited. I mean, I don't know how excited I am, because the Wahila's gonna get a monologue, and I don't know if I can keep that voice up for an entire monologue, but we'll see.
I believe in you.
We'll see what happens.
I'm sure you can do it.
Thanks, I'm sure. Okay, so here's our last question, and I think it's the best possible question, and it comes from the wonderful Kat, who is another Discord person who is also writing a lot of, like, really cool ideas about the Hainai lore. But Kat says, extremely serious question about Winter Market. If Cornelius's date was cold, what would he set on fire first to warm them up? Innocent bystander? Disturbingly common monsters? Himself? I think you should answer this question since you are Danny Boyd.
That is a very funny question. Thank you, Kat. Oh, man. I think the joke answer is, the nearest building, right? Like, Danny, are you cold? I'm gonna set a building on fire for you.
It's his favorite move.
It's his favorite thing to do. He likes burning down buildings.
He keeps doing it.
He keeps doing it. Oh, that's so funny. I think a more interesting answer is that because he has such mastery over fire, he could probably just start a fire from nothing and just carry that in his hand.
Oh.
And he'd find some way of like, making it portable, like, like a fire in a jar or something. A fire that's not so hot that it'll burn the hands of whoever's holding it. So I think he'd do some cool, like, magic-related thing in that way.
Oh, you just gave me an idea. He should gift Danny a fire in a jar.
That would be so cool, actually. Oh, the implications of that would be so interesting.
Oh, God, and if it goes out?
Oh, no! Oh, that would be so awful. Danny would start panicking.
Oh, boy. What's that?
Danny would start panicking.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's like an everlasting fire, and then suddenly it goes out. You're like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. What does this mean?
I don't know.
You can add that to your fanfic list, you guys.
I will say, I did answer this question in the Discord also, and I said, Kat provided examples, like, what would he set on fire first? And then it was like, innocent bystander, disturbingly common monsters, himself. And I was like, well, here's the thing, Kat. He hates himself, so...
True, so he'd probably be setting himself on fire before he'd set an innocent bystander on fire.
He's done with the innocent bystander burning. He left that in his past life. He's trying to be better about it.
He's trying.
He's trying.
He is doing a lot better now, for sure.
It's never too late to change, but certainly the fact that he hates himself is justified.
He has done some questionable things in the past.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Questionable, putting it mildly.
Putting it mildly, yeah. Although, we do have to celebrate him for certain questionable things he's done in his past, because one of the things we haven't talked about in the Pit episode is that he was the one who flayed Clarence Thompson alive.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and and I do mean alive, because Clarence Thompson was healing through that, and by the way, this brilliant thought was from Edward, who actually suggested it, which is that, okay, but if he's healing through it, then how could Savard have kept his body in the way that it was found? And Edward's like, oh, maybe he, like, flash fried his heart and brain at the same time. And I'm just like, so true!
Yeah, that was a stroke of brilliance, because I was thinking of, like, what would be the most horrific way to die? And the answer was being burned from the inside out. I can't imagine experiencing that, and I think that would be the worst way for me to go out personally. And I was like, well, Savard would really want Clarence Thompson to suffer, so why not do it that way?
So do we.
He really was terrible.
Clarence Thompson is my favorite punching bag, and I do think we need to, like, cover more about him in a future episode.
Yeah, for sure.
But yes, I do think that was really cool of him to
I
do.
would agree with that.
And I should add on to the inspiration thing, because, like, as I'm going on, I do have to, like, add more inspirations. But basically, one of the inspirations, like, from a story perspective of the Pit episode, was me sort of like, as I said, what is the long winter? And even though I kind of already knew in my head what the long winter would be, I needed a way to kind of express just how frightening it is, especially to an elder like Savard, who is very unfazed by a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, when you're so self-assured and you're so sure of your own strength and power, what do you really have to fear?
Exactly. He's so self-assured. He thought himself as the master of fear, master of death. So something big has to shake him. And I do think Savard, for all of his flaws, he doesn't strike me as the kind of elder who would cut and run the first sign of trouble, and which is also a problem when he should have, like, left at the first sign of trouble in the Pit episode.
Exactly.
But he is, if nothing else, he is extremely hardened, he is extremely brave, and he does not stop. It takes a lot to kind of turn him from his path. It takes something deeply frightening or violent to turn him from his path, which is why he did not have any sort of revelation of his own wrongdoing until his son was killed by himself.
Yeah, it truly does make him, like, the perfect impetus for a horror story, because if you have somebody willing to do horrible things, it helps move the story along a little bit more conveniently, I think is a good word to use.
Exactly. He's a great vehicle, and I also think a great character, because now that he's been turned from his path and is trying to be a better person, there are many ways in which he is sort of a moral compass, but at the same time, because he is still the same sort of, like, he hasn't fully changed, he's still stubborn. He's still like this hardened older man who still thinks he's doing the right thing, and in this case he is, but, it's still rough when you have somebody who is convinced he's doing the right thing when there might be conflicts or doubt. That's kind of the main conflict between him and Mary, even though Mary thinks he's a good guy and believes that he wants to help. There is still a risk of, like, he does too much, or, like, he's a little too much,
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, but that's why we like him. That's why I think he's an interesting character. That's why I like to pick his brains quite a bit. And also, I wanted to express, like, how scary the winter, like, the long winter is, to have frightened this kind of man. And even more so when, the other elders are like, oh god, the long winter did this thing where Clarence Thompson was flayed, and people immediately suspected, like, wait a minute, that seems a little too specific for an unknowable, like, force that might affect elders. And they were right, because that was not the long winter, that was Savard. And so jumping off from flayed this elder alive and then hung him up for all to see as a warning, now we have to go, what is scarier than that?
Exactly. Sorry.
That's something I wanted to, like, explore and everything.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing you explore. It's going to be a really interesting jump from, like, one level of horror to the next one.
So, for those of you listening, only patrons get the full episodes for these, but we did want to share most of the episode to the public. So if you're interested in listening to the rest of the episode that you weren't able to hear, please do sign up for our Patreon. That's patreon.com/HiNaiPod. Bonus episodes go to the Ate tier, the $10 tier, because that's actually the bonus episode tier, as well as the Patreon shout-out tier on our regular episodes. And that is kind of like our ideal support system. Patreon is our ideal support system. And we really appreciate everyone who has joined our Patreon and helped Hainai continue. So thank you so much. Maraming salamat. And see you on the next B-Sides. We will be releasing these episodes every month. So see you next month. Bye-bye!